Rejected by his parents, the baby dragon's only chance was a human stranger. The drilling machine stopped working again. David Mills wiped the sweat from his forehead and kicked the stubborn piece of equipment. 3 months on Verdant Prime and everything seemed designed to break down. The red soil stuck to his boots as he walked around the machine looking for the problem. Verdant Prime was supposed to be a paradise. That's what the colony brochure said. Rich minerals, perfect weather, and friendly alien neighbors. The Drakmori had welcomed humans 50 years ago, and the two species lived in peace. The dragon-like aliens kept to their mountain cities while humans built their settlements in the valleys. David found the loose wire and fixed it. The machine hummed back to life, digging deeper into the earth. He was alone at Mining Station 7, 20 miles from the nearest human settlement. Most people didn't like the isolation, but David preferred it. No crowds, no politics, just him and his work. The sound came from behind the large rocks near his shelter. A weak crying noise like a hurt animal. David turned off the machine and listened. There it was again. He grabbed his toolkit and walked toward the sound. Behind the rocks, something small and silver moved in the shadows. David stepped closer and saw what looked like a baby dragon, but different from any Drakmori he had seen before. This one was tiny, barely the size of a house cat, with silver scales that caught the light. Most Drakmori had golden scales that gleamed like metal. The little dragon was hurt. One wing hung at a wrong angle and cuts covered its small body. It looked up at David with bright blue eyes and made the crying sound again. David knelt down slowly. He had learned basic Drakmori language for his job, but this baby probably couldn't understand yet. "Easy there, little one," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." The baby dragon tried to crawl away but was too weak. David carefully picked it up, surprised by how light it was. The silver scales felt warm against his hands. Back in his shelter, David cleaned the dragon's wounds with his medical kit. The little creature was very sick and needed proper care. David had no idea how to treat a Drakmori, but he did his best. He gave it water through a small tube and wrapped its hurt wing. The next day, David drove his transport to New Haven, the closest human settlement. He needed to report what he found and get help for the baby dragon. Dr. Sarah Kim ran the medical center in New Haven. She was one of the few humans who had studied Drakmori biology. When David brought the baby dragon to her, she was shocked. "Where did you find this?" she asked, examining the little creature. "Near my station. It was hurt and alone." Dr. Kim frowned. "David, this dragon has silver scales." "I've never seen that before." "All Drakmori have golden scales. Is that bad?" "I don't know. We need to contact the Drakmori Council and let them know we found one of their young." Elder Thorgrim arrived at New Haven 3 hours later. He was an old Drakmori, twice as tall as a human, with golden scales dulled by age. His eyes were ancient and wise, but they showed no warmth when he looked at the baby dragon. "This creature should not exist," Thorgrim said in his deep voice. "Silver scales are a curse. This hatchling was cast out according to our law." David felt angry. "Cast out? You mean abandoned? This baby almost died." "It should have died," Thorgrim replied coldly. "Our people have laws. Defective offspring cannot be allowed to live. They weaken the bloodline." "Defective?" Dr. Kim stepped forward. "This baby seems healthy except for the injuries. The silver scales mark it as cursed. Our ancestors knew this truth. Such hatchlings bring shame to their families and disaster to our people." David couldn't believe what he was hearing. "So you just leave babies to die because they look different?" "It is our way. It has always been our way." Colonial Administrator Helen Ward had been listening quietly. Now she spoke up. "Elder Thorgrim, while we respect your customs, this hatchling is now in human care. We cannot simply let it die." Thorgrim's eyes flashed with anger. "Human Ward, you do not understand. This creature must not live. If you keep it, you violate our treaty. There will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" David asked. "The kind that end peaceful relations between our peoples." Helen looked worried. The peace treaty with the Drakmori was very important. Without it, humans might have to leave Verdant Prime. "David, maybe we should think about this carefully." But David had made up his mind. He picked up the baby dragon, which had been sleeping quietly through the conversation. "I found this little one dying and alone. I'm not going to abandon it now because of some old rule." "You are making a mistake, human," Thorgrim warned. "This path leads to sorrow." "Maybe," David said. "But I can live with sorrow better than I can live with letting an innocent baby die." That night, David took the baby dragon back to his mining station. He set up a small bed for it next to his own and sat watching it sleep. The little creature breathed slowly, its silver scales rising and falling. Dr. Kim had given him medicine and instructions for caring for the dragon. She had also given him a warning. "The Colony Council is meeting tomorrow," she said. "They might order you to give the hatchling back to the Drakmori." David didn't care about the council. He looked at the sleeping baby and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. This little dragon needed him, and he wasn't going to let it down. Outside his shelter, the night sounds of Verdant Prime filled the air. Somewhere in the mountains, adult Drakmori flew through the darkness on their great wings. They had cast out this baby because it was different, but David saw only a small creature that needed care and protection. He reached out and gently touched one silver scale. The baby dragon opened its blue eyes and looked at him. For a moment, they stared at each other. Then the little dragon made a soft sound, not the crying from before, but something almost like a purr. "Don't worry, little one," David whispered. "I'll take care of you. I promise." The baby dragon seemed to understand. It closed its eyes and went back to sleep, safe and warm for the first time in its short life. David stayed awake most of the night thinking about what he had gotten himself into. Tomorrow would bring problems. The Colony Council, the Drakmori, maybe even war, but tonight a baby that should have died was alive and safe. That had to count for something. Ember learned to fly on a Tuesday morning in autumn. David watched from his porch as the young dragon spread his silver wings and lifted off the ground for the first time. 3 months had passed since that first night, and the little hatchling had grown into something amazing. The dragon wasn't little anymore. Ember now stood as tall as David's waist and was getting bigger every day. His silver scales had grown brighter, catching sunlight like mirrors. But it wasn't just his size that had changed. Ember was smart, smarter than any animal David had ever known. "Come down before someone sees you," David called out. They had to be careful. The Colony Council had ordered him to keep the dragon hidden while they worked out what to do. So far, David had managed to avoid any official visits to his mining station. Ember landed gracefully and walked over to David. The dragon could understand human speech perfectly now, though he couldn't speak yet. Instead, he made different sounds that David had learned to understand. A soft chirp meant happiness. A deeper rumble meant he was thinking about something. And when Ember was excited about learning something new, he made a sound like wind chimes. That wind chime sound came often. Ember loved to watch David work with the mining equipment. The dragon would sit for hours, studying how the machines worked. Sometimes David would find him examining tools, turning them over with his clawed hands as if trying to understand their purpose. Dr. Kim visited every few weeks to check on Ember's health. On her latest visit, she brought news that worried David. "The colonial government is getting pressure from the Drakmori Council," she said. "Elder Thorgrim has been asking when you're going to return the hatchling." "Ember," David corrected. "I named him Ember. You gave it a name?" Dr. Kim looked surprised. "David, you're getting too attached. The council might decide to hand him over to keep the peace. Let them try." Dr. Kim sighed. "I've been studying Ember's medical scans. There's something strange about his brain activity. It's much more complex than normal Drakmori patterns. I think his intelligence might be connected to those silver scales somehow." David had noticed Ember's intelligence too. The dragon seemed to understand not just words, but ideas. When David explained how the mining equipment worked, Ember would nod as if he truly understood the principles behind it. One afternoon, David was having trouble with his computer system. The mining data wasn't processing correctly, and he couldn't find the error in the code. Ember watched him work for a while, then approached the computer screen. The dragon stared at the scrolling code for several minutes. Then he reached out with one clawed finger and pointed at a specific line on the screen. David looked at where Ember was pointing and found the mistake he had been looking for all morning. "How did you know that?" David asked in amazement. Ember made his wind chime sound and pointed at the screen again. This time he gestured at several other lines of code. David checked each one and found more errors. The dragon had somehow understood the computer program better than David himself. That night, David received an urgent message from Helen Ward. "Report to Colonial Headquarters immediately. Bring the dragon." David knew this day would come, but he wasn't ready. He looked at Ember, who was practicing writing human letters in the dirt with his claw. The dragon had been teaching himself to read by watching David's work. We have to go see some people tomorrow, David told him. They might want to take you away from me. Ember stopped writing and looked at David with his bright blue eyes. The dragon made a questioning sound. I won't let them, David promised. We're a team now. The next morning, David and Ember traveled to New Haven. People on the street stopped and stared as they walked to the government building. Most humans had never seen a dragon up close, especially one with silver scales. In the meeting room, Helen Ward sat with several other colonial officials. Elder Thorgrim was there too, along with a younger Drakmori that David didn't recognize. This one wore the red markings of a military commander. David, Helen began, this is Commander Oryx of the Drakmori Defense Force. He's here to discuss the hatchling. Commander Oryx was younger than Thorgrim, but looked much more dangerous. His golden scales were darker, almost bronze, and his eyes were sharp and cold. Human Mills, Oryx said in perfect English, you have interfered with our laws for too long. This abomination must be destroyed. His name is Ember, David said firmly, and he's not an abomination. He's intelligent and gentle. Oryx laughed, but there was no humor in it. Intelligence in a cursed being is even more dangerous. Silver scales have brought nothing but trouble to our people throughout history. That is why we remove such creatures. Remove? David felt his anger rising. You mean murder. We mean survival of our species. Ember had been standing quietly beside David, but now he stepped forward. The young dragon looked directly at Commander Oryx and made a series of sounds. They weren't the simple chirps and rumbles David was used to. These were more complex, almost like words. Oryx stepped back in shock. It speaks the old language. How is this possible? Elder Thorgrim leaned forward, studying Ember carefully. What did it say? It said, why do you fear what you do not understand? Oryx's voice was uncertain now. The room fell silent. David had never heard Ember make sounds like that before. The dragon looked up at him and made his familiar wind chime noise as if saying everything was okay. Impossible, Thorgrim muttered. Hatchlings cannot speak the old language. It takes years of study. Dr. Kim, who had been taking notes, looked up excitedly. This proves my theory. Ember's brain development is far beyond normal Drakmori patterns. He's not defective at all. He might be the most advanced member of your species. Lies, Commander Oryx snapped. Silver scales bring only corruption and weakness. But Elder Thorgrim looked troubled. He studied Ember for a long time, then spoke quietly to Oryx in the Drakmori language. Their conversation grew heated, with Oryx becoming more and more angry. Finally, Oryx stood up. Very well. The council has made its decision. We will return in 3 days to collect the creature. If it is not surrendered willingly, we will take it by force. You'll have to go through me first, David said. Oryx smiled coldly. That can be arranged. After the Drakmori left, Helen turned to David. You need to be reasonable about this. We can't fight them over one dragon, no matter how special he is. Then don't fight them, David replied. Just let me and Ember leave. We'll find somewhere else to go. David, you're talking about running away from everything you've built here. David looked down at Ember, who was watching the conversation carefully. The dragon reached out and touched David's hand with his claw. A gesture of comfort. Some things are worth running for, David said quietly. That afternoon, David and Ember returned to the mining station. David began packing supplies while Ember helped by sorting through equipment. The dragon seemed to understand they were preparing to leave. As the sun set, David sat on his porch with Ember beside him. The dragon had grown so much in just 3 months. Soon he would be too big to hide, too noticeable to keep secret. But David didn't care about the dangers ahead. 3 days, he said to Ember. Think you can stay out of trouble for 3 more days? Ember made his wind chime sound and pointed at the sky. In the distance, dark shapes flew between the mountains. Adult Drakmori on patrol, searching for any sign of the silver-scaled dragon they believed should not exist. David checked his equipment one more time. If Commander Oryx wanted a fight, he would get one. But David and Ember wouldn't be here when it started. They would disappear into the wilderness of Verdant Prime, and no one would find them until David was ready to be found. The young dragon settled down beside David's chair, his silver scales glowing softly in the evening light. Tomorrow would bring danger, but tonight they were safe. Together they watched the stars appear in the darkening sky, neither knowing that their real adventure was just beginning. The forest was darker than David had expected. Ancient trees stretched high above them, their thick branches blocking most of the sunlight. Ember stayed close to David as they moved deeper into the wilderness, away from any place the search teams might look. 2 weeks had passed since they left the mining station. David's transport was hidden in a cave 5 miles behind them, covered with branches and rocks. They were on foot now, carrying only what they needed to survive. David had camping gear and emergency food supplies. Ember didn't need much except water and the small animals he caught while they traveled. The dragon had grown again during their time in hiding. He was now as tall as David's chest, and his wings were strong enough to carry him for short flights. But Ember rarely flew during the day. The search teams had aircraft, and a silver dragon would be easy to spot against the green forest. Dr. Kim had been sending David coded messages through his emergency radio. The news wasn't good. Commander Oryx had brought more soldiers to Verdant Prime. They were searching every human settlement and threatening anyone who might be helping David and Ember. The colonial government was scared. Some officials wanted to declare David a criminal and hand him over to the Drakmori. Others argued that protecting Ember was the right thing to do. While they argued, David and Ember stayed hidden, but hiding wasn't enough anymore. That morning, David had heard aircraft engines in the distance. The search was getting closer. "We need to find better shelter," David told Ember as they stopped to rest beside a small stream. "Somewhere they can't track us from the air." Ember drank from the stream and then made a series of sounds. Over the past weeks, his ability to communicate had improved dramatically. He could now make sounds that almost resembled human words, though his throat wasn't designed for human speech. David had learned to understand most of what Ember was trying to say. This time, the dragon was telling him about something he had seen during his morning flight. Ruins of some kind built into a mountainside about 10 miles north of their current location. "Old Drakmori ruins?" David asked. Ember nodded and made more sounds. From what David could understand, these weren't just any ruins. They were ancient, older than the current Drakmori cities, and they had been abandoned for a very long time. David made his decision. "Show me." They traveled north through the afternoon, following animal paths through the thick forest. Ember flew ahead sometimes, scouting the route and watching for danger. His silver scales helped him blend with the cloudy sky better than David had expected. As the sun began to set, they reached the base of a tall mountain. Ancient stone steps had been carved into the rock face, leading up to what looked like a temple built directly into the mountain. The architecture was definitely Drakmori, but it was different from the modern cities David had seen. This was older, more elegant, with flowing curves that seemed to grow naturally from the rock. "This place gives me the creeps," David muttered as they climbed the stone steps. Ember seemed excited, though. He ran ahead, his claws clicking on the ancient stone. At the temple entrance, he stopped and waited for David to catch up. The entrance was a tall archway carved with symbols David didn't recognize. Some were definitely Drakmori writing, but much older than the script used today. Other symbols looked completely alien, as if they belonged to a different language entirely. Inside, the temple was surprisingly well preserved. Soft light came from crystals embedded in the walls, still glowing after who knows how many years. The main chamber was huge, with a high ceiling supported by carved pillars. More symbols covered every surface, but what caught David's attention was the artwork. The walls showed scenes of Drakmori life from long ago, but these dragons looked different. Some had the familiar golden scales, but others had scales of different colors: silver, blue, red, even deep purple. They were all working together, building cities and flying among the stars. "Ember, look at this," David called out. The dragon was already studying the wall paintings with intense interest. He approached one section that showed silver-scaled dragons working with some kind of advanced technology. Their claws were touching glowing panels, and lights responded to their movements. Ember reached out and touched the wall where the silver dragons were painted. Suddenly, the crystal lights in the chamber grew brighter. A humming sound filled the air. "Ember, what did you do?" Before the dragon could respond, a section of the wall began to glow. Ancient Drakmori text appeared in the air above them, projected by some technology hidden in the stone. David couldn't read it, but Ember could. The dragon's eyes went wide as he read the floating words. More text appeared, accompanied by images. David saw pictures of silver-scaled dragons doing amazing things. They were flying between planets, working with technology that seemed beyond even current human science, and leading other Drakmori in great works of art and engineering. They were leaders, David realized. Silver dragons weren't cursed. They were special. Ember made excited wind chime sounds and pointed at more text. The dragon was reading faster than David could follow, absorbing information that had been hidden for thousands of years. The pictures showed a gradual change in Drakmori society. The silver dragons began to disappear from the images. The last few showed them being driven away or killed by golden-scaled dragons. The final image showed a silver dragon being cast out from a great city, while others watched in silence. They were erased from history, David said quietly. Someone didn't want future generations to know about silver dragons. Ember nodded sadly and touched another section of wall. New text appeared, and this time David could understand some of it. The language was simpler, more like modern Drakmori writing. The text told the story of the last silver dragons. They had tried to convince their people that change and progress were necessary for survival. But the golden dragons wanted to keep the old ways unchanged forever. Fear and jealousy led to persecution. Eventually, the silver dragons were declared cursed, and the law was made to kill any silver-scaled hatchlings. But the text said something else that made David's heart pound. The silver dragons weren't gone forever. The genetic trait would return someday when the Drakmori people needed it most. And when that happened, the silver dragons would have to choose between hiding their true nature or revealing the truth that had been buried for so long. Ember was the first silver dragon born in over 1,000 years. Outside the temple, the sound of aircraft engines broke the evening quiet. David grabbed his emergency radio and heard Commander Oryx's voice giving orders to search teams. Target located at Ancient Temple Site 77 Alpha. Move in and surround the area. The abomination must not escape this time. David looked at Ember, who was still reading the ancient text. The dragon had found his heritage, learned the truth about his people, but now they were trapped. Ember, we have to go. They found us, but the dragon wasn't moving. He was staring at a final section of text that David couldn't see clearly. Ember made a determined sound and pressed both claws against the ancient symbols. The entire temple began to glow. Hidden machinery awakened after centuries of sleep. The crystal lights blazed like small suns, and a deep vibration ran through the mountain. Outside, David could hear voices shouting in alarm. The aircraft engines changed pitch, as if the pilots were having trouble controlling their machines. Ember turned to David with glowing eyes. The dragon had activated something powerful, something that had been waiting in this temple for a very long time, but David didn't know if it would save them or destroy them. The ancient technology was waking up, and with it, secrets that could change the relationship between humans and Drakmori forever, if they survived long enough to use them. The mountain shook like an earthquake was starting. David grabbed onto a stone pillar as ancient machinery rumbled to life deep beneath the temple. Around them, crystal lights blazed brighter than daylight, and holographic displays flickered into existence throughout the chamber. Ember stood in the center of it all, his silver scales reflecting the brilliant light. His claws remained pressed against the ancient control panel, and his eyes glowed with the same blue light as the crystals. The dragon was connected to the temple's systems in ways David couldn't understand. Outside, the shouting grew louder. Commander Oryx's voice cut through the noise, barking orders at his soldiers. But there was something different in his tone now. Fear. David activated his emergency radio and listened to the Drakmori communications. What he heard made his blood run cold. Commander, our weapons aren't responding. All systems are offline. The aircraft can't maintain altitude. Something is interfering with our engines. Sir, the mountain is broadcasting some kind of signal. It's affecting all our technology. Ember was doing this. Somehow, the ancient temple had given him control over Drakmori technology. David watched in amazement as more holographic displays appeared, showing technical diagrams and star charts that looked thousands of years old. Ember, what is this place? The dragon turned his glowing eyes toward David and spoke. Not the chirps and rumbles David was used to, but actual words in clear English. This is the archive, Ember said in a voice that was his own, but somehow older. The last sanctuary of the Silver Heralds. I am remembering what my people forgot. David stared in shock. You can talk. Actually talk, the archive teaches. It awakens the knowledge that sleeps in silver scales. Ember's voice was growing stronger, more confident. David, my people have been dying slowly for 1,000 years. They cast out the silver dragons because they feared change, but change was the only thing that could save them. New images appeared in the air around them. David saw charts showing the decline of Drakmori civilization over the past millennium. Birth rates falling, technological progress stopping, entire planets becoming uninhabitable as their people refuse to adapt. They're going extinct, David realized. Yes, and they don't even know it. Ember touched another control, and the images changed to show star maps. The ancient silver dragons tried to lead the people to new worlds, to teach them new ways of living. Instead, they were hunted and killed. The golden dragons chose tradition over survival. The mountains stopped shaking, but the crystal lights remained bright. Through the temple entrance, David could see Drakmori aircraft struggling to stay in the air. Their engines were failing, and several had been forced to land. Commander Oryx will come up here with ground troops, David warned. Let him come, Ember replied. It is time for the truth to be revealed. Heavy footsteps echoed from the temple entrance. Commander Oryx appeared with a dozen armed soldiers, their weapons ready. But when they saw the blazing lights and floating displays, they stopped in amazement. Impossible, Oryx breathed. This temple has been dead for centuries. It was waiting, Ember said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Waiting for a silver dragon to awaken it. Oryx raised his weapon, but nothing happened when he pulled the trigger. The temple's influence extended to personal weapons as well. You see, Ember stepped forward, no longer the frightened hatchling David had found months ago. Your technology serves the silver dragons as it was designed to do. Your ancestors built it that way, before fear made them forget. More Drakmori entered the temple, drawn by the impossible sight of ancient technology coming to life. Elder Thorgrim was among them, his old eyes wide with shock. This cannot be, Thorgrim said weakly. The old stories say the silver dragons were cursed. The old stories lie, Ember replied. He touched the wall and new images appeared. These showed the real history, the same events David had seen earlier, but in greater detail. The silver dragons were teachers and innovators. They created the technology your people still use today. They explored the galaxy and made contact with other species, including humans. David's mouth fell open. Humans? But first contact was only 50 years ago. First official contact, Ember corrected. The silver dragons met humans over 2,000 years ago, when your people were still learning to work metal. They shared knowledge and friendship, but when the silver dragons were driven away, that connection was lost. The holographic displays showed ancient scenes of dragons and primitive humans working together, teaching them agriculture, showing them the stars, sharing the dream of exploring space together. We were meant to be allies from the beginning, David whispered. Commander Oryx had been listening in growing rage. Lies and propaganda. The silver scales bring only corruption. Do they? Ember asked calmly. He gestured to the working technology around them. Everything you see here was built by silver dragons. Your cities, your ships, even your weapons. We created them all, and we can control them all. To prove his point, Ember touched another control. Outside the temple, every piece of Drakmori technology stopped working. Aircraft landed safely but couldn't restart. Communications went silent. Even the lights in distant cities flickered and went out. The demonstration lasted only a few seconds, but its message was clear. The silver dragons weren't just genetically different. They were the key to everything the Drakmori had built. Restore our systems immediately, Oryx demanded. I will, Ember agreed. But first you will listen to what the archive has to teach. The holographic displays changed again, showing the current state of the Drakmori people. The images were troubling. Birth rates had fallen to critical levels. Genetic diversity was decreasing with each generation. Several colony worlds had been abandoned when their populations became too small to maintain. You are dying as a species, Ember said bluntly. The Golden Dragon's refusal to change has led you to a dead end. In less than 500 years there will be no more Drakmori in the galaxy. Elder Thorgrim sank to his knees, overwhelmed by what he was seeing. How do you know this? The archive has been monitoring Drakmori civilization since the silver dragons were exiled. It predicted this outcome centuries ago. Ember's voice was sad but determined. There is still time to change course, but only if you stop killing silver dragons and start listening to them. And if we refuse? Commander Oryx asked defiantly. Ember looked at him with glowing blue eyes. Then your people will join the silver dragons in extinction. The choice is yours. The temple fell silent except for the humming of ancient machines. David watched the faces of the Drakmori soldiers and officials. Some looked angry, others confused. But on the face of Elder Thorgrim, David saw something different. Hope. Young Herald, Thorgrim said slowly, using an ancient title of respect. What would you have us do? Ember smiled. The first truly happy expression David had seen from him since they began running. I would have you remember what it means to be Drakmori. Not just the golden dragons who chose stagnation, but all Drakmori, silver, gold, and any other colors that might be born. We are stronger together than apart. He touched the wall one final time, and the archive systems began to power down. The crystal lights dimmed to a gentle glow, and the holographic displays faded, but the knowledge they had shared remained. The choice is made, Ember announced. The archive will remain active, ready to teach any who wish to learn. But remember this day when a silver dragon offered to save a dying people, and you had to decide whether tradition was more important than survival. Outside, Drakmori technology began working again. Aircraft engines started and communications crackled back to life. But inside the temple, everything had changed. David looked around at the Drakmori faces and saw the beginning of a civil war. Some would accept Ember's message and work for change. Others would fight to preserve the old ways at any cost. The real battle was about to begin. The first attack came at dawn, 3 days after the temple awakening. David woke to the sound of explosions in the distance and the urgent beeping of his emergency radio. Through his window at the Human Research Station, he could see smoke rising from New Haven. All civilian personnel, take shelter immediately. Admiral Susan Blake's voice crackled through the radio. We are under attack by Drakmori forces. This is not a drill. David grabbed his gear and ran to the next room where Ember was studying star charts on a portable computer. The young dragon had grown again, now standing taller than David and with wings that could easily carry him for long flights. But more importantly, his connection to Drakmori technology had grown stronger since the archive awakening. It's starting, isn't it? David asked. Ember nodded grimly. Commander Oryx has declared the archive and all silver dragons to be enemies of the Drakmori state. He has the support of the old council and about half the military. What about the other half? Fighting back. There is a young commander named Lyra who believes in change. She has gathered the progressive Drakmori and declared the old council illegitimate. David looked out the window again. More explosions lit the morning sky. So we have a three-way war. Traditionalist Drakmori against progressive Drakmori, with humans caught in the middle. Not caught, Ember corrected. Chosen. Admiral Blake has declared human protection for all silver dragons and their allies. Your people are fighting for us. That was news to David. He activated his radio and tuned to the colonial military frequency. What he heard made his heart pound. Admiral Blake was coordinating the defense of human settlements against Drakmori attacks, but the reports coming in were grim. Human weapons were designed for fighting other humans, not dragons with energy weapons and the ability to fly. Ember, our people are brave, but they're outmatched. Drakmori technology is centuries ahead of ours. Not all of it. Ember's eyes glowed briefly as he accessed the archive through his mental connection. Most Drakmori military technology was designed by silver dragons. I can help level the playing field. Over the next hour, Ember worked with human engineers through encrypted communications. The dragon transmitted technical specifications that allowed humans to modify their weapons and equipment. Energy shields, improved armor, and targeting systems that could track flying enemies. But the real breakthrough came when Ember revealed something the archive had been hiding for centuries. The original silver dragons didn't just build technology for the Drakmori. He explained to David and Dr. Kim, who had arrived with a team of scientists. They built backup systems that only silver dragons could access. Failsafes in case they were ever betrayed. What kind of failsafes? Dr. Kim asked. Ember's scales glowed brighter. Every Drakmori ship, weapon, and city system has hidden protocols. I can shut them down, redirect them, or even take complete control. You mean you can hack their entire military? David was amazed. More than hack. I can turn their own weapons against them if necessary. The first test came that afternoon. A squadron of Drakmori attack ships approached the Human Research Station, their energy cannons charging for a devastating strike. David and the others took cover while Ember stood in the open courtyard, his eyes blazing with blue light. The attack ships fired their weapons, but instead of destroying the station, the energy beams curved away harmlessly into the sky. The ship's targeting systems had been overridden by Ember's commands. Confused and angry, the Drakmori pilots tried to regain control of their systems. Instead, they found their ships turning around and flying back toward their base completely against their will. Impressive, Admiral Blake said when she arrived later with reinforcements. But can you do that with larger forces? The answer came the next day when Commander Oryx launched a full assault on the human capital city. 200 Drakmori warships filled the sky, ready to reduce the city to ash. But as they approached their target, something went wrong. Half the ships simply stopped moving, their engines shutting down simultaneously. Others began firing on their own allies, their weapon systems hijacked by invisible commands. Within minutes, Oryx's mighty fleet was in chaos. From his position at the research station, Ember controlled the battle with his mind. But David could see the strain it was causing. The dragon's scales had gone pale, and he was breathing heavily. "Ember, you're pushing too hard," David warned. "I have to," Ember replied through gritted teeth. "If I don't stop them now, they'll destroy everything we've worked for." The battle ended with Oryx's fleet in full retreat, but the war was far from over. The traditionalist Drakmori regrouped and began using older, simpler weapons that Ember couldn't control as easily. Meanwhile, the progressive Drakmori under Commander Lyra established their own bases and began attacking traditionalist strongholds. The conflict spread across the planet and into space. Human colonies found themselves defending refugees from both sides, while also fighting to protect their own settlements. Admiral Blake coordinated the defense with remarkable skill, but everyone knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. The turning point came during the Battle of New Haven. Oryx had gathered his most loyal forces for a final assault on the human capital. This time, he brought ground troops and older weapons that Ember couldn't easily control remotely. David found himself in the middle of the fighting, armed with one of the modified human weapons and fighting alongside both human soldiers and progressive Drakmori. The battle was brutal, with energy blasts and explosions lighting up the night. Ember fought too, using his growing size and strength to protect human defenders. But David could see that his friend was exhausted from using his technological abilities. The young dragon was fighting on pure determination now. The battle seemed lost when Elder Thorgrim appeared, leading a group of ancient Drakmori elders. For a moment, David thought they had come to support Oryx. Instead, Thorgrim stood between the opposing forces and raised his voice. "Enough," the old dragon roared. "Look what we have become. Drakmori fighting. Drakmori while our ancient allies shed blood to protect us. This is not who we are." The fighting paused as everyone listened to the respected elder. "I have lived for 800 years, Thorgrim continued. "I have seen our people grow weak and fearful, hiding from change instead of embracing it. But today I have seen a silver dragon risk his life to save both Drakmori and humans. If this is corruption, then let us all be corrupted." Several Drakmori soldiers laid down their weapons. Others looked uncertain, caught between old loyalties and new understanding. Commander Oryx pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with rage. "Traitor, you have been deceived by human lies and silver dragon witchcraft." "Have I?" Thorgrim asked calmly. "Then explain why their witchcraft seeks to save lives while your purity brings only death." Oryx raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Commander Lyra landed between them. The young progressive leader had arrived with her own forces, tipping the balance decisively. "Stand down, Oryx," Lyra commanded. "The war is over. Your followers are abandoning you and your cause is lost." David looked around the battlefield and saw that Lyra was right. Most of the traditionalist Drakmori had stopped fighting. Some were actively helping wounded humans and progressives. The tide had turned, but Oryx wasn't finished. "If I cannot have a pure Drakmori future, then no one will have any future at all." The traditionalist commander activated a device that David recognized with horror. It was a fusion bomb powerful enough to destroy the entire city. "Ember!" David shouted. The silver dragon was already moving, his exhausted body finding new strength in desperate need. Ember launched himself at Oryx, wrapping the traditionalist commander in his wings just as the bomb exploded. The blast was contained by Ember's body and enhanced shields, but the effort nearly killed him. David reached his friend just as the young dragon collapsed, his silver scales blackened and cracked. "Ember! Stay with me!" The dragon opened his glowing eyes and smiled weakly. Did we win? David looked around at the mixing groups of humans and Drakmori, former enemies now working together to help the wounded. Elder Thorgrim was speaking quietly with Admiral Blake, and Commander Lyra was organizing rescue teams. Yeah, David said softly. We won. 5 years had passed since the Battle of New Haven, and Verdant Prime looked very different now. Where once there had been separate human settlements and Drakmori mountain cities, mixed communities now dotted the landscape. The morning sun shone on buildings that combined human engineering with Drakmori architecture, creating something entirely new and beautiful. David stood on the observation deck of the new Unity Research Center, watching young humans and Drakmori learning together in the gardens below. At 38, his hair was starting to show gray, but his eyes still held the same determination that had driven him to save a dying dragon hatchling years ago. The morning briefing is ready, Dr. Kim announced as she joined him on the deck. She wore the uniform of the Joint Species Medical Corps, one of many new organizations that had grown from the ashes of war. How's our patient today? David asked. Kim smiled. See for yourself. They walked through corridors filled with the soft glow of Drakmori crystal lighting, powered by human fusion reactors. The combination of technologies had produced advances neither species could have achieved alone. Faster-than-light communication, medical treatments that worked on both human and Drakmori biology, and starships capable of crossing the galaxy in months instead of years. The medical bay's main chamber was huge, designed to accommodate patients of all sizes. In the center, on a platform that could support several tons, Ember rested in the morning sunlight streaming through crystal windows. The silver dragon was magnificent now. At 5 years old, he stood 3 times David's height, and his wingspan could shadow a city block. His scales had regrown after the battle, brighter and more beautiful than ever. But more impressive than his size was his presence. When Ember spoke, people listened. When he moved, others followed. He had become exactly what the ancient archives had predicted, a leader capable of bridging 2 worlds. Good morning, old friend, David called out. Ember opened eyes that still glowed with the same blue light as the archive crystals. Good morning, David. Though I think old friend is inaccurate. You're getting older, but I'm just reaching maturity. Smart mouth, David laughed. How are you feeling? Strong enough to attend today's ceremony. The doctors have cleared me for flight. Today was special. The Joint Council was formally establishing the Silver Herald Academy, where young Drakmori and humans would learn to work together, using the knowledge preserved in the ancient archives. Ember would be the first director of combined studies. But first, there was another ceremony to attend. An hour later, David found himself in the new Unity Council chambers, facing a mixed assembly of humans and Drakmori representatives. Admiral Blake, now governor of Verdant Prime, stood at the podium beside Elder Thorgrim, who served as the Drakmori cultural advisor. David Mills, Governor Blake began, 5 years ago you made a choice that changed the course of history. You saw an innocent life in danger and refused to abandon it, even when doing so put your own life at risk and threatened the peace between our peoples. The assembly listened quietly as Blake continued. Your actions began a chain of events that led to war, yes, but also to understanding. Today our species are stronger together than either was alone. Children who would have been enemies now play together. Scientists who would have competed in isolation now share discoveries that benefit all. Elder Thorgrim stepped forward. Among my people, there is an ancient title reserved for those who risk everything to preserve life and wisdom. David Mills, by the authority of the new Drakmori Council, and with the approval of the human colonial government, I name you the first non-Drakmori to hold the title of Life Guardian. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. David accepted the honor with humility, knowing that he had simply done what felt right at the time. The real heroes were the people who had chosen to change, to abandon fear and prejudice in favor of cooperation and growth. After the ceremony, David and Ember flew to the Archive Temple, now restored and serving as a research center. The ancient mountain had been turned into a place of learning where scholars from both species worked to unlock the knowledge left by the original silver dragons. Any new discoveries? David asked Commander Lyra, who now served as the Archive's military liaison. Always, she replied with excitement. Yesterday we found star charts showing the locations of other archive sites throughout the galaxy. There may be dozens of worlds with similar temples, all waiting for silver dragons to activate them. Ember studied the holographic star map floating before them. My ancestors were thorough. They prepared for the possibility that their knowledge might be needed again someday. And now it is, David observed. The Drakmori aren't the only species facing extinction. According to these records, several civilizations have died out because they couldn't adapt to change. Which is why the Academy is so important, Ember said. We need to train a new generation that sees diversity as strength, not weakness. Humans and Drakmori working together, but also reaching out to other species we haven't met yet. They flew back to New Unity City as the sun began to set. The city sparkled with mixed lighting, human electric systems and Drakmori crystal arrays working in harmony. In the harbor, ships with hybrid technology prepared to carry the first joint exploration missions to distant stars. David's house was simple compared to the grand buildings around it, but it was home. Ember had built his own dwelling nearby, sized for his massive frame but designed to accommodate human visitors. They often shared meals on David's porch, talking about the future and remembering how it all began. Do you ever regret it? Ember asked as they watched the stars appear. Giving up your quiet life as a miner to become involved in galactic politics? David considered the question. His life had certainly become more complicated. As the first life guardian and Ember's closest human friend, he was constantly called upon to mediate disputes, attend ceremonies, and help plan humanity's expanding role in the galaxy. No, he said finally. That morning when I found you dying behind those rocks was the best day of my life. Everything good that's happened since then came from that moment. Ember made his wind chime sound, the same happy noise David remembered from when he was just a hatchling learning to fly. I've been thinking about the future, the dragon said. The Academy will train the next generation, but we need to do more. We need to find other species, other civilizations that might benefit from what we've learned. You mean exploration missions? More than that. I mean a new way of traveling the galaxy. Instead of conquest or trade, we offer partnership. Help struggling civilizations find new ways to survive and grow. David smiled. It was exactly the kind of ambitious, idealistic plan he had come to expect from Ember. And somehow, the dragon always managed to make impossible dreams become reality. When do we start? We? Ember looked surprised. Did you think I'd let you run off and save the galaxy without me? I'm your life guardian. Where you go, I go. Ember laughed, a sound like distant thunder mixed with joy. In that case, we start tomorrow. I've already spoken with Governor Blake and Elder Thorgrim. They're assembling the first joint exploration fleet. That night, David lay in bed thinking about the future. Somewhere out there among the stars were civilizations facing the same choices the Drakmori had faced. Some would choose change and growth. Others would cling to tradition until it destroyed them. But now they wouldn't face those choices alone. A silver dragon and his human friend would be there to offer another option. The radical idea that difference was not something to fear, but something to celebrate. The next morning, David woke to find Ember waiting in his garden, fully grown and magnificent in the dawn light. Behind the dragon, the first joint exploration ship gleamed with hybrid technology that neither species could have built alone. Ready? Ember asked. David grabbed his travel pack and stepped into the harness that would let him ride safely on Ember's back during their flight to the ship. It was the same pack he had carried when they first fled into the wilderness, but everything else had changed. Ready, he confirmed. As they took to the sky, David looked down at the world they were leaving behind. Verdant Prime had become a symbol of what was possible when different peoples chose cooperation over conflict. Now they would carry that message to the stars. The exploration ship's captain was a young human woman named Lisa Chen, Dr. Kim's daughter. Her first officer was a progressive Drakmori who had grown up learning human languages. The crew was equally mixed, all of them trained at the Academy to see diversity as their greatest strength. Where to, Director? Captain Chen asked as they boarded. Ember consulted the ancient star charts one more time. There, he said, pointing to a distant system. The archive records indicate a civilization there that's been sending distress signals into space for the past 50 years. They need help. And we're going to help them, David added. It wasn't a question. As the ship engaged its hybrid drive and leaped toward the stars, David felt the same sense of purpose he had experienced that first morning when he found a dying hatchling behind some rocks. Some things were worth fighting for. Some choices defined not just individual lives, but the future of entire civilizations. And sometimes the most important choice was simply refusing to abandon someone who needed help, no matter what it cost. The ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying its message of hope to a galaxy that desperately needed to learn that survival came not from purity, but from the courage to change and grow together.